Not all probiotics are created equal. New Purina Systemic Supplement remains live and active after the pelleting process and throughout the digestive system, making it all the way to the hind gut. Systemic was designed to support normal recovery after exercise and occasional gastrointestinal stress. Whether you're using a probiotic now or not, it's time to use a live and active supplement from a name you trust. Visit mq.purinamills.com to try Purina Systemic Probiotic Supplement today.
You are listening to the Horse Radio Network, part of the Equine Network family.
Greetings, everyone. Coach Jen here, and thanks for tuning in to Horse Tip Daily, episode 1577, brought to you today by RideTV. Today's tip features Horses in the Morning co-hosts Glenn and Jamie, along with Alayne Blickle, for a chat about the care and maintenance of horse pastures.
Well, I would like to welcome to the show Alayne Blickle of Horses for Clean Water. Alayne, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Jamie. I'm glad to be here.
Well, it's been a minute, but you're kind of the go-to for farm management stuff, and you actually have a company called horsesforcleanwater.com is your website. Tell us what Horses for Clean Water is.
Yeah, thanks. It's a business that I started in the 90s. So a long time ago, and I teach about horse keeping and land management. So I try to look for nature-based approaches to managing problems, whether it's pest control or pasture management or manure management and composting, reducing chemical use. And I work with horse owners individually, but I also work with agencies and natural resource organizations.
Well, you also write for thehorse.com, which is kind of the go-to for appropriate information for things like that. And you wrote an article about keeping your pasture healthy. And so I guess let's go through them. What are 5 ways to keep your pasture healthy? Glenn has just bought a new farm. I'm constantly having horses coming and going. So this is something probably everybody listening has to deal with.
Yeah, that's great. There's a lot of things that you can do for managing your pastures so that you don't actually have to go first. For your first strategy isn't to go reach for chemicals and fertilizers and things like that. The first one is to not let your horses overgraze. So you want to keep at least 3 to 4 inches of plant material in your pasture. And that's because that 3 to 4 inches is like solar panels for your grass plant, and that's how it manufactures its food. And if it goes below that 3 to 4 inches, then it starts reabsorbing nutrients from its roots, and its roots actually get shorter and the plant gets less healthy.
Yeah,
so
but I gotta
that's
tell
your
you,
first one.
We're here in the East Coast where farms tend to be smaller. I don't know any pasture that's over 3 inches.
Well, they should be actually, and it's not just the West Coast or the East Coast, or it's the whole world. That's whether you're talking about managing elephants in Africa or horses in Kentucky, it should never be grass plants should never be grazed below 3 to 4 inches, because then they reabsorb their roots and their roots get short and they are less drought tolerant, and they're not going to be able to get the minerals and the nutrients that they need from the soil. So if you went to the Midwest to a prairie where it had never been mechanically farmed, and you dug up those plant roots, those grass plants, they would actually be over 6 feet tall.
Wow.
Long. And that's what grass plants are meant to be, but we traditionally have mismanaged them, whether we're talking about the savannas in Africa or, my pastures on my property here in Idaho.
Well,
Do you know what
So-
really helps that, Glenn?
that?
As far as like keeping the grass, because we have Bermuda grass, and they said that the roots go about 7 feet deep. And what really helps is getting 11 inches of rain in 48 hours. That really helps. Get the roots.
Yeah.
Well, you know what I think too? We talk, and we have this argument all the time. We live in Ocala where farms like to look pretty, kind of like Lexington.
Mhm. Gotcha.
And I think they tend to mow their pastures too short. They mow the pastures and they mow them down to 1 or 2 inches. Like, you shouldn't be doing that, but they want pretty pastures and they don't care.
Yeah, I think a lot of people have Kentucky in mind, and I don't know where that came from. They make pastures look like lawns, but that's not what's best for your horse or for the grass or for the soil or the environment. So what you want is you want to graze it down to about 3 to 4 inches, and then let it rest and regrow to 6 to 9 inches. And then you can put your horse back on it. Once the horse is grazed down to that 3 to 4 inches, you would mow at about 4 to 6 inches to even the playing field, then let it rest and regrow, and put them back out when it's back up to 6 to 9 inches.
Now, I'm
So-
listening to that, and here I have a question about my horses, because we have 20 acres, and it is 6 to 9 inches in spots, but then other spots they've grazed it down to the nubs. So I've got like really thick, lush, tall places, and we're always wondering why they ignore those spots. What is it, and how can I get them to eat it?
Yeah, let's talk about that. So horses, their heads are like a foot long, their sinuses, their tongues, it's huge compared to our heads and our mouths and our tongues. And that means that their sense of taste is just highly sophisticated, especially compared to us. And two things that they have really good receptors for are sugars and salt. And grass plants store their sugars in the bottom couple of inches of the plants as well as in the roots. And those sugars are what the plants need to survive. It's their food, the carbohydrates. But the sugars are sweet, and that's what the horse is going for. They have teeth on the top and the bottom, and they can clip those like fingernail clippers. They can clip grass plants down to the nubbins, and they are going for the sugar. And I like to tell people that the bottom 3 to 4 inches of the grass plant, that is the candy bar, and the top 4 to 9 inches, that's the bran muffin. And
that's the spinach salad of the pasture.
Yeah. Well, there's only so many bran muffins that we all need too, I suppose. But we know that we don't want them on a candy bar pasture. We want them on a bran muffin pasture. We want them to have a lot of fiber and not so much sugar. But they are designed to go for the sweet stuff. So if they find a spot where it's short, they're going to keep going back to that, and the plant tries to grow back, 1 inch tall, and the horse can effectively go in there and just clip it down right to the ground.
Yeah.
So there's two ways to combat that. And one is having a confinement area, and the second is to doing rotational grazing. And it doesn't matter what size pasture you have. I've seen 1 acre pastures divided in half or in thirds, and you can rotate your horse through that area of smaller pastures. You can't use it like a turnout area. You have to use it like a pasture. And that's one of my bugaboos, I guess I'd say, is that people say, oh, I have my horses out on pasture. And I look, and it's a dry lot turnout. To me, a pasture is where you're actively growing grass, and that's your purpose for having it. If you want it as a dry lot, that's something different. But if you want it as a pasture and you want to have grass in it, you cannot overgraze it or you're going to kill your grass plants and get more weeds. So you have to use your confinement area and balance things out. And you also have to do rotational grazing so you don't get those areas that you're referring to where it gets overgrazed.
Yeah, so I think having that confinement area or dry lot is important. Now, another thing I do here, and I think it's probably, we've talked to you before about it, is I compost the manure. But again, fortunately, I have 20 acres, so my barn's in the front and my compost is all the way in the back. So I take it all the way in the back and I dump it. And for about 6 months, I let it sit. And then we spread it on the field. As we spread it, I start the second pile. So then I've got that pile that then begins to cook, for 6 months. And we've been spreading it like in spring, but in the article here, it says that late spring or fall, you can actually spread it as well.
Yes. Spreading compost is great. And, we want to do a little bit more than stockpiling it. It sounds like you're doing a pretty good job. You can get finished compost in a couple of months if you keep it damp and you turn it occasionally so that
yes, we do turn it. We spread it occasionally, but yeah, damp has not been a problem here. So
good.
You kick it over and you can see the steam and smoke coming out. So it's cooking in there. But yeah,
good job. Yep, good. I like that. Yes. So the time to spread it is when your plants are going to be the most active, and grass plants tend to like a little bit cooler weather. They don't like the really hot midsummer weather as much. I mean, you don't either. They like it, but they're not going to be growing as strongly as they do in the spring and in fall, early fall. So those are just good times to use it when the plants can really utilize it. But frankly, anytime that plants are growing, as long as it's not winter and plants are dormant, you don't want to spread then. And you don't want to spread probably during your rainiest part of the year, because it's likely that it's going to get washed off and be a water quality problem.
Yeah, exactly. And then now you don't mention it in this article, but dear God, I am so sick of going out my pasture and pulling weeds. How do you control weeds in your fields?
Well, if you manage your pastures so that you have a healthy stand of grass, the goal is that the grass outcompetes the weeds. Mm-hmm. And the way that you do that is by not allowing bare spots in your pasture. So the bare spots happen when an area gets overgrazed because they're going for that sugar, like we just talked about. So if you can do rotational grazing, or you can fence off an area that's been overgrazed, and then do what I call a green bandage, where you put grass seed in an area that's maybe been grazed down to the ground. So in other words, you want to manage it so you have grass growing in those spots and not weeds, because nature's going to put something there. Nature doesn't like a vacuum, so it's going to put in something. And weed seeds are ubiquitous. They're blowing. They're everywhere in our environment, and they're just waiting for a place to set up camp.
Yeah, it's so interesting. You explain everything so well. So we're running out of time, but where can people go to learn more about you, contact you with questions, anything like that?
I have a website. It's Horses for Clean Water. We've got like 60 tip sheets on there that are super easy. They're like $2 a piece. And they've got lots of great pictures and how-to tips. I've got ways to make feeders and round pens and mounting blocks, permanent mounting blocks, as well as ideas on confinement areas and mud management and landscaping with native plants, and more about pasture management and water conservation and pest control, least toxic pest control. So lots of tip sheets and information and newsletters that you can sign up for.
Blog, everything.
That's where you go. Yep.
Cool. Alayne Blickle, horsesforcleanwater.com. Thank you so much for coming on, and thank you for providing this service to everybody.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
You can enjoy your favorite equine videos all in one place with RideTV, the ultimate equine streaming platform. The newly relaunched RideTV has all the series you love, like Cowgirls and Ridiculous Ranches, plus top-tier training videos and event footage from BailRacing.com and Horse and Rider on Demand. Whether you're ready to relax with your favorite series, binge watch competition footage, or train with a world champion, subscribe to RideTV today for only $19.99 to see where your ride takes you. Visit ridetvgo.tv to subscribe.
Well, there you have it. Horse Radio Network has thousands of engaging podcasts for horse people, and you can have them sent right to your phone. Just subscribe via your favorite podcast player. This is Coach Jen, and I will be back again soon with another tip. Until then, go ride your horse. The Horse Radio Network and the Horse Radio Network hosts are not responsible for statements made by guests on the Horse Tip Daily. Please use your own judgment when listening to the tips on this show.